people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. A closer look at Reina Tellez, who will be standing in for former champion Erika Cruz in the Amanda Serrano fight early next month as a result of Erika failing yet another anti-doping test. Reina, 22 years old and orthodox fighter to the champion Amanda Serrano, who is a southpaw at 37. 15 years older than the challenger. Young Reina sports a professional record of 13 wins with no losses and 1 draw, 5 knockouts. Mexican and Irish. Fighting is in the blood for young Reina, who was last in action earlier this year in September against Mayela Perez, who she decisioned over 8 rounds, and before that she fought in June against Maria Salinas. She also won a decision against. Needless to say, based on who she's been fighting so far, as a developing fighter with 14 professional bouts in her CV, this is a big step up for her. But having seen her in action on a good number of MVP shows, Reina Tellez is a very good stand-in for Erika Cruz. Short and stout, just like Erika, a mid-range to inside fighter, like Satara. Perhaps not as experienced as an Erika Cruz, and she doesn't lead with the same hand. Erika is a southpaw, whereas Reina is an orthodox fighter, but you can see the parallels. You can see the similarities, and I've been developing a high opinion of Reina's boxing, her brand of action. She's a good fighter. Even if I think she is about to suffer her first professional loss, it's hardly the end of the world losing to Amanda Serrano, of all people, so early in one's career. There's valuable experience to be gained in that fight. The danger for Amanda, I'd say, is that she is 37 years old, facing a fresh-faced, unbeaten youngster with everything to gain and really nothing to lose save her Amanda is coming off those 2 consecutive losses to Katie Taylor, capping off their trilogy. Now she returns to her natural weight at featherweight to defend her 2 alphabet titles. And you can see it. You can see it almost immediately. That between how Amanda likes to go about fighting a fight and how Reina likes to go about fighting a fight, this is going to be a war. This is going to be a real tear-up. Reina is a good substitute for Erika Cruz. That makes for an all-action shootout, which is what they were shooting for with that rematch. Fighting an unbeaten up-and-comer is arguably a little better. Now, there was a story last week that Sky Nicholson volunteered to stand in for Erika, but we know how Sky likes to go about fighting a fight, playing keep-away, playing boxing's version of freeze tag. Comparatively, seeing Reina in action, I think fighting Reina makes for a more entertaining fight. So here's looking forward to that in a little over a week's time on the island of Puerto Rico, where Amanda Serrano will return and I think get back in the winner's bracket. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, veteran boxing scribe Julian Julianis reports this will be the undercard for Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios, Gary Antoine Russell versus Andy Hirioka, Armando Resendiz versus Edgar Berlanga, and Lester the Molester Martinez will join the card as well. What do we think? Well, you guys already know I liked that Gary Antoine Russell versus Andy Hirioka fight at 140 pounds for what is Gary's WBA title, originally supposed to go down on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis, but it seems that when Gervonta dropped out, so did that fight, which I think comes at the expense of the fighters. I think they would have made more money boxing on Jake's undercard than boxing on Ryan's. And I think more people would have seen them boxing on Jake's undercard than boxing on Ryan's, because Jake's fight was on Netflix. It wasn't behind a paywall. This fight will be. Still welcome news that the fight has been rescheduled, as it promises to be an all-action shootout Andy Hirioka is an action guy, and so is Gary Antoine Russell. Andy became the mandatory to the WBA title by beating Ishmael Barroso many months ago, and he's been waiting in the wings for his opportunity to become a world champion. Will he do it? Hard to say. Gary comes from a solid amateur background, and as a professional, he's a big 140, a strong 140. Also on that card, the ring return of Puerto Rican sensation, if you consider him a sensation, Edgar Berlanga, who's going to be in tough against Armando Resendiz, who's coming off that big upset win over former champion Caleb Plant. I believe that Armando Resendiz has already been elevated to full WBA champion as a result of Terrence Crawford's retirement. If he's not champion already, he is about to be. Edgar Berlanga fighting a guy like this off a violent knockout loss. Yeesh. Remember that he was in action earlier this year in the tri-state area opposite the ring of the United Kingdom zone, Hamza Shiraz, who violently stopped him in front of his hometown crowd. To then go in with another violent puncher in Armando Resendiz is less than ideal, but such is the case for Edgar, who chose free agency over re-signing to Matchroom, and thus he is subject to the elements. You figure that if he would have re-signed to Matchroom, they would have built him back up gradually, getting him one or two stay-busy fights. The way it is, he didn't re-sign to them. He ends up fighting Hamza, who beats the crap out of him. Now he's about to fight Armando, who's going to beat the crap out of him, in what is a Puerto Rico versus Mexico rivalry, though without the luster of a Felix Trinidad versus Oscar De La Hoya, a Chavez versus Camacho. No, this fight between these two guys isn't necessarily on that same scale, though it is another entry into that age-old Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry. Edgar migrating over to the PBC for an opportunity. Those are the only guys he hasn't worked with yet. He's been at Top Rank, he's been at Matchroom, he's fought on at least one of Turkey's shows, now he's washed up on the shores of PBC Island. Do you think he's really gonna do this, though? I'm skeptical, because he could always double back and see if he can't work something out with Eddie Hearn. This is a dangerous fight, and I wonder how much it pays boxing on Ryan's undercard. Are they gonna make this the co-main event at least? You know that Edgar Berlanga is one of these fighters with a big ego and even bigger purse demands. The idea that he's gonna be buried on the prelim card or kicking off the main one is a bit hard to digest, given that this guy wants a lot of money every time he gets out there. That doesn't mean he deserves it, but he still wants it. And can he get it boxing on Ryan Garcia's undercard, all behind a paywall? Pay-per-views not selling as much as they used to. How much money is really on the table for Edgar Berlanga? He's likely going to lose anyway, because Armando Resendiz is a tough customer. Having moved up from middle up to super middle, he's proven himself formidable in upsetting former champion Caleb Plant, who had aspirations of boxing that same Edgar Berlanga. Armando ruined those plans, best described as a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, whereas Edgar still strikes me as a fighter who's caught between styles. Originally, he was billed as a puncher. Then he found out he doesn't really punch that hard, tried to be more of a boxer. Except he's not that good of a boxer either. Edgar Berlanga is more of a personality in boxing than a bona fide pugilist. He's got a big ego and a big persona, but doesn't have the skills to boot. And I think that if he does fight Armando, Armando's gonna steamroll him. Armando doesn't have the identity crisis that Edgar Berlanga has. He's not a fighter who's caught between styles. For better or worse, he's a pressure guy. He knows exactly what he's going to do when the opening bell sounds, but does Edgar, who could fast become a man holding back a storm. It's Armando, after all, that has all the momentum going in, and I like Armandio to win. Lester de Molest is supposed to be boxing on this same show per the report. Lester, who's coming off that draw against Christian Mabili. The WBC had ordered a rematch between them, then rescinded that order to order Mabili versus Shiraz instead, for what is the newly vacated WBC title left behind as a result of Terrence Crawford's subsequent retirement, thus leaving Lester the Molester without a dance partner. I never really felt that Team Mobili wanted to run it back with Lester the Molester. That was a hard fight for the both of them. But Lester seemed a lot more willing to do it again than Team Mobili, who are still in a pole position to become world champions by way of the WBC, where rolling the dice with Lester is perhaps not a good idea. Not again. A lot of fingers in this pie when you think about it. PBC is involved. Golden Boy, of course, on behalf of Brian Garcia, but also Probox on behalf of Lester the Molester. I imagine that if all of this comes into fruition, it will be billed as a pay-per-view on both Amazon Prime and DAZN. It's a little bit surprising that there aren't more Golden Boy Promotions fighters on this show, since the biggest name on the bill is Brian Garcia. So why are they not using this card to get some of their other fighters out there? Where's Zurdo Ramirez? Where is Floyd Schofield? Oscar Duarte? What's going on with all of those fighters? Since in many ways, it really is the Golden Boy Promotions fighter bringing all the star power to this card. Ryan Garcia, whether you like him or not, is the biggest name on the entire show. He's the one in the main event, and you would have thought that Golden Boy would use this card to keep some of their other fighters active. In any event, it's all supposed to go down early next year. The card is more or less shaping up nicely. I do like that Andy Hirioka versus Gary Antoine Russell fight, and I do like the idea of Armando Resendiz steamrolling Edgar Berlanga. Any chance I get to see Edgar get beat up, I'm gonna take it. To be honest, I like more of the undercard fights than the actual main event. We'll see if it happens that way. Over to Jake Paul, who's coming off his latest loss to Anthony Joshua this past Friday, saying, "I'm going for the Cruiserweight World title." Despite the loss, Jake Paul vows to return. Jake Paul survived for longer than most expected in his weekend fight against Anthony Joshua, and even though the fight came to its invariable conclusion in the 6th round, when Joshua landed a right hand across Paul's jaw that would break it in multiple places, Paul is still keeping a positive attitude about his performance and his intentions to recover and rebuild. Paul just recently underwent surgery to repair his jaw and remove some damaged teeth, saying he'll be on a liquid diet for next week, but he anticipates a fairly quick return to the ring at a weight class more suitable for him. "We will heal the broken jaw, come back and fight people at my weight," he said. "I'm going for the Cruiserweight World title." While some may credit Paul's resolve for taking the damage he sustained and still intending to fight again, where exactly he goes remains a mystery. Paul's fights have drawn massive attention while turning out not to be very entertaining, and there's no real reason to believe Paul would fare much better against world-class cruiserweights if he intends to pursue a world title. Jake will at least have some time to carefully choose his next adventure in the boxing ring while he heals up from this outing. You know, we were talking about it on the live stream just the other day that Jake didn't actually take much punishment throughout the course of that fight because he spent so much of it either running or falling to his knees as a means to not get hit, so that when a single right hand lands, it broke his jaw in 2 places. Just one well-placed right hand. That's the power of a heavyweight, folks. That's all it took. One well-placed shot. Being honest with you, I don't think it would be any better against the world-class cruiserweight, because just imagine if it were Jai Opataya connecting a shot like that on Jake Paul. You know that I actually think Anthony held back. That wasn't the meanest or most spiteful right hand I've ever seen him throw. I think to some extent he was going easy on the kid and sort of pulling his punches, whereas with Jai only has one gear. If Jai hits you... Didn't he give the last guy a brain bleed? Though needless to say, I don't think Jake Paul has any intention of fighting a Jai Opataya. If he's targeting a world title, it's not going to be his. In any event, he's going to be out for a while. The prognosis for a broken jaw, where surgery is needed and there are multiple breaks, is anywhere in between 3 to 6 months for full healing. That means that Jake Paul likely won't return at any point in the first quarter of next year. In fact, he likely won't return until the end of the second 3 to 6 months.
At the earliest.
You know that I don't actually mind Jake Paul. I don't have the problem with him that some other people have. From the very beginning, all I saw was a social media influencer who wants to try his hand at boxing against other novices like himself. And I don't see anything wrong with that.
Some people do.
There's a lot of people have a problem with who Jake has been fighting, but who he's been fighting are other novices like himself, guys who are supposed to be at a similar skill level. So I didn't really mind what he was doing or who he was fighting. Maybe it's what he was saying.
Yeah, he was talking shit. And people really didn't like that he fought a past-it Mike Tyson.
Bordering on a senior citizen, a junkie in former champion Julio Cesar Chavez, that Jake was quite opportunistic with his matchmaking. But for me, he was no more opportunistic than what we see in regular boxing involving regular boxers. When a Floyd Schofield fights a Tevin Farmer, who's coming off of 3 back-to-back losses.
What the fuck is that if not opportunistic?
People are angry that some of the guys that Jake fought were naturally smaller than he is, but how is that different from Gervonta Davis bringing up super featherweights up to lightweight?
Hector Luis Garcia, Lamont Roach. What do you think he was doing by fighting those guys? There are plenty of lightweights to go around. He decided to fight a couple of super featherweights instead. Or when he stuck weight stipulations on Ryan Garcia, that Jake Paul's opportunism is not that different from the opportunism you see in regular boxing.
Except that I don't hold Jake to the standard that I hold these other guys to, because these other guys, they're supposed to be the esteemed professionals. If you're gonna hold anybody to a standard, it should be them more than Jake.
I don't mind him, even if he is a bit delusional and at times annoying with what he's saying and how he sells himself.
I think the real question is, on the heels of this knockout loss and getting his jaw broken in 2 places, how marketable is he? It's my understanding, based on industry rumors, that the metrics for the Jake Paul versus Joshua fight were robust. Expect to hear about big numbers, but now that Jake has lost for a second time,
where does he go from here, and who does he fight? Because he's not going the conventional route, boxing gatekeepers and journeymen to amass experience. He's targeted high-profile, albeit opportunistic opponents. How many opponents like that are left?
He doesn't want to go back in there with somebody like Anthony Joshua and experience what he just experienced, getting his jaw broken in 2 places. That was the one opponent that was not opportunistic, and he was in over his head. He's not going to do that again. So if he doesn't, who does he fight that makes for a big fight, that keeps Netflix involved? Because Netflix only wants the biggest of the big fights. So who's left out there for Jake?
Tommy Fury rematch, maybe? Run it back with him, try to get revenge? Or what about Chase D'Amour? He just beat Top G. He just beat Andrew Tate.
KSI, perhaps? With Netflix as the mediator, the platform for the fight, a fight between Jake and KSI could be very big. They both have very big followings. They could do that.
They could try.
We're not going to see Jake Paul for some months. Like I said, he's going to sit out all of the first quarter, and I anticipate most of the second. It'll be summertime, probably, before he fights again.
It's gonna be a while.